This is our annual class on the Pesach Seder and on the Haggada. And today's class, we're going to go over some of the rules of the Seder, some reminders. I'm pretty sure most people know. And we'll also have some ideas about the Haggada, and get you all set for this year's Seder. First, I wanted to share a quick video that I mentioned on Shabbat for a few people. I think it's very funny, and hopefully, let's see if I can do this correctly. There's got to be a way to do this. Okay. Do you see the YouTube screen? Let's see. See if this works.
צריך להיות משהו של מייקרופון, אודיו. מה זה קורה?
Oh, wait a minute. Start video. That's on mute.
לא למיוט. הנה.
זה חשוב לך? אתה צריך אותו? מאוד. אז אנחנו נעשה חלופי שבויים.
לא, זה כמה.
אתה תפתח לנו מעבר بالقناة المتفقين. אנחנו
נקבל
של אמצעי אכילה, يعني בייגרים, בירות, כאילו נחמד.
Naked landscape.
אנחנו ניתן לך את פריח.
למה תמיד אז הולכת ככה? נקדיש את הבר.
לא מחרתי את הכניסה לבית. מה בעיה? כרגיל, במנהרה. כן, פה. חשבתי, אם אתה כבר פה,
All right. That was a little funny video. I just wanted to share with you for entertainment purposes, but also some educational purpose. we have this idea that we're selling the chametz and it's not a real sale. In that particular video, he sold the chametz, and he did not expect the Gentile, the Arab, to come and acquire the chametz. He did. He came right on Pesach in the middle of the Seder, and he said, no, I sold it. He says, I need machati l'chumra. I sold it because of a stringency. He says, no. You didn't sell it l'chumra. You sold it to Mahmoud. You sold it to me. I bought it. It's mine. I can do whatever I want with it. So that is in actual fact that's what happens. The Gentile owns the chametz. And the funny part, also another funny, there are a few funny parts in the video, but at the very end, he's like, oh, while you're already here, he says to the Gentile, we have a light, and it's, he's trying to hint to him, that the light's not on, right? We have a light and it's not on, and somehow it has to go on. Anyway, so cute. All right, back to the Seder. Is everybody muted? Okay, good. All right. So the goal of the Seder, and we're going to say this again, God willing, towards the end, if I'm looking at my notes, the goal of the Seder is to build emunah, to build faith in Hashem, not only in yourself but also in your children, your guests. The whole idea is to show the world, show your guests in particular, you have a job. You have a job to do. Whoever's leading the Seder has a job equal to the job of a Rebbe in a school or a Rav in a shul. Your job is to inspire. And the most important point of the Seder is that Hashem loves us, takes care of the world, and we need to know that. And that's what Yetziat Mitzrayim is all about. That's what all of this is all about. And so whatever we say today, whatever other cute little points we come up with, whatever the laws are of the Seder, the end result by the end of the night should be that whoever came to your Seder goes away more inspired and more in touch with the fact that Hashem guides the world and loves us. All right? That's the goal. As I said, we're going to talk about some of the rules. So some of the rules that are important is there is we have a rule. One of the halachot of the Seder, it's very famous, is that we need to drink 4 cups of wine. Now, those cups of wine aren't whatever you want those cups of wine to be. They need to be wine. There are opinions that it could be grape juice. Rav Moshe's son said that Rav Moshe did not hold of people drinking grape juice. That's a little bit of a controversial issue. It seems that Rav Moshe certainly agreed that grape juice is acceptable if you, for whatever reason, don't drink wine, whether you're fighting an addiction, or wine is bad for you, or you don't like the taste. For any of those or similar reasons that you don't want to drink wine, you can indeed, according to most poskim, drink grape juice. But it can't be watered down grape juice. It needs to be completely wine. It can be watered down wine. That's also okay. In fact, probably better. Some people mix grape juice and wine. That's even better. But wine is the best. But you have to drink a certain amount. And according to most opinions, that amount is either 3 or 2.9 fluid ounces per cup. And when it comes to a mitzvah d'oraita, for example, when Shabbat and Pesach on the same night, and you have to make Kiddush on Shabbat is the d'oraitis from the Torah. The 4 cups of wine are from the rabbis on Pesach. So therefore, you need a bigger cup for the first, at least, definitely the first Kiddush on during the Seder when it's on Shabbat. Not this year, not relevant. So for our purposes, those 4 cups of wine should each be about 3 fluid ounces. That's how full the cup needs to be. Do you need to drink the whole thing? Ideally, yes. But if you can't, if you drink the majority of the cup, that's also good. So like 1.75 ounces is what we're talking. We're talking about like a shot, a little more, 2 shots of wine, or grape juice, or a mixture, as we said before. So that's ideal. That's some of the, like I said, some of the laws about that. There is a special, unique aspect of the Seder called haseva. There's a custom to lean when you're drinking the cups of wine when you're eating the matzah and during some of the other mitzvot of the day. And if your custom, is to lean, and there's certain situations where it might not be your custom, but if it's your custom to lean, most people's custom it is, as far as I know, I haven't taken a poll of this, not formally or informally, but it seems like most people lean during most of these mitzvot of the Seder. In that case, if you did not lean when you were drinking these cups of wine during the Seder, you need to drink another cup of wine to make up for the cup you didn't lean with, that you should have leaned with. All right, that's that. Matzah. There's several times when we're going to eat matzah during the Seder, and also there's a shear. And I should also say, besides the shear, in other words, the size of the Kiddush cup and the amount that you're supposed to drink, there's also a time limit. You're supposed to drink this 2.9 ounces, it's 3 ounces, fluid ounces of wine, and you should drink them as quickly as possible. You shouldn't be sipping at it like like a aristocrat. You're supposed to like jug it down as fast as you can. If you can take all 3 in one gulp, great. But 2 or 3 gulps should be probably the most that it takes for most people, unless they have a swallowing issue, and then of course that's an exception to the rule. Okay, so then comes the matzah. Matzah, you're supposed to eat 1.5 fluid ounces, and you have 3.5 minutes or so to do it. That's the ideal, 3.5 minutes. If you can't do it in 3.5 minutes, you have up to 9 minutes. But those 9 minutes, that's an extreme case. And that's assuming that you're not spending that time, chatting with your friend or making jokes with your neighbor about how you're eating the matzah. So I haven't seen you around here lately. How do you crunch your matzah? These kinds of conversations are not why you're allowed that extra time. You should really finish that matzah within 3.5 minutes if you can. The reason for that is because that's the halachic definition of eating. And you have to eat the matzah halachically. You have actually a Torah obligation to eat some of this matzah, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So the 1.5 fluid ounces of matzah is, if you could crumble up the matzah and stick it into a shot glass, that would be about 1.1 ounces. That's a standard shot glass. And that's the mitzvah on the rabbinic level. On the Torah level, it's 1.5. That's the lowest number, 1.5 ounces of matzah, which is usually calculated as about either one whole machine shemura matzah. And by the way, for this particular mitzvah of matzah, it needs to be shemura matzah, which means the matzah was guarded all the way from the time that it sprouted. There was an effort to make sure that there would be no water falling on this. There was no rain, nothing fell on this wheat from the time that it became a kernel all the way up to the time it was baked and is now ready to be eaten. So no water has hit this, and it's now shmura matzah. It should be either one whole machine matzah is about 1.1 fluid ounces. Or 1.5 fluid ounces, and 2/3 of a round, usually handmade shmura matzah is also this 1.5 fluid ounces. Again, you shouldn't be talking, and again, here you have to lean, and of course, if you didn't lean again, what do? You have to do it over again and eat that 1.5 ounces as quickly as possible. Again, preferably within 3.5 minutes. It is a smart idea. This is advice. It's not a law, but it's a smart idea. If you have time Wednesday afternoon before the Seder, it's a good idea to measure this out for your guests beforehand. It's a lot faster of a process, a lot less confusion. You already have your 1.1 ounces you're going to give the guest, plus you're going to break off from the leader is going to break off from their matzah to put onto that stack, and then that's the matzah that your guests are going to eat. So it's a lot easier that way, and much more organized. And of course, there are 3 times in the Seder when we have to eat matzah. Of course, people end up eating matzah during the meal as well, but that does not have to be shmura matzah according to most opinions. So What are the three times? The first time is when you make habotzi, mitzvah of matzah. Then there's the Hillel sandwich, right? Which is matzah with maror, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And that could be a little bit less matzah. And then finally, the last matzah of the Suda, which is the last food you're supposed to eat before you go to sleep, which is the afikomen. Right before Birkat Hamazon, you eat another 1.5 fluid ounces of matzah, and that's a big deal. That's actually also a large amount that you're supposed to have for that. So another piece of advice: pace yourself during the meal. Don't fill yourself up to the point where when you see that matzah, your eyes are going to get big and you're going to want to pass out just from the fear of having to munch this 1.5 ounces of matzah in 3.5 minutes. So pace yourself. Don't eat too much. Be prepared. You should know yourself well enough to know how much you need to do that. We talked about Zman. We talked about how much time it should take. Let's talk about maror. Maror should also be 1.1 fluid ounces. It also should be eaten within 3.5 minutes. Now, obviously, depending on what you're using for maror, this could be very difficult. Right? If you're eating raw horseradish, which is what you're going to eat, horseradish, it needs to be raw. It needs to have been, have been grated that day within 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is, and it needs to be eaten again. 1.1 fluid ounces of this really bitter food needs to be eaten in 3.5 minutes, which is not an easy thing to do. Many people use romaine lettuce, which is, as you know, not so bitter. Perhaps not bitter at all, and that lettuce should be approximately how much of that should you eat? Also 1.1 fluid ounces. How do you know that you have 1.1 fluid ounces? It should fit. The romaine leaves should be able to cover a sheet of paper, which is a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. The reason for that is because 8 by 10 is how much. 8 by 10 is how much lettuce it takes to be 1.1 fluid ounces. Make a little more. 8.5 by 11, a sheet of paper. It's easier to sort of picture and easier to use. Most people have a sheet of paper laying around somewhere in their house. Hopefully it's not with your chametz, and so you can take that, cover your paper with lettuce, and then you know how much you need to eat. And again, you need to basically eat it as soon as possible. Some people, especially like yeshiva people, try to stuff it all in a couple of bites, and it's a little unseemly, granted, but that for sure fulfills the all opinions of how quickly it should be eaten. Again, you have about 3.5 minutes to eat this, and up to 9 minutes. If it's taking more than 9 minutes, you perhaps did not fulfill your obligation. So it's a big deal. A common question rabbis receive, especially if we have older congregants, is what do I do if I don't eat late? Usually, so that's a very common question. It's not an easy question to answer because different situations require a real psak, a real halachic decision based on your individual case. But a very common answer, a very common sort of trick to use is that the Seder needs to start at a certain time. It needs to start at 8 o'clock. It cannot start any earlier. And the food has to come in the midst of the Seder, right after Magi, right? So what are you supposed to do? So first of all, it's a good idea to rest. They're very highly recommended by Poskim and Rebbeim to take a nap Erev Pesach. I know that sounds crazy. There's so much to do. Well, that's kind of the idea. Sort of plan for that, right? Make sure all that stuff you need to do, you do on Monday and Tuesday this week. You stay up all night tonight if you have to, but you get some sleep. You get a chance to rest on Pesach, Erev Pesach, so that you can enjoy the Seder. It's a huge mistake, a very common but very huge mistake, and that many housewives very often end up being so exhausted that they don't enjoy the Seder. The Seder needs to be enjoyed by everybody, men, women, and children. And the children should not be bored or asleep either. They also need to rest so that they can stay up the entire Seder. Now, in terms of, because of that idea we talked about earlier, of your job at the Seder is to inspire people to love Hashem and to know the whole story of the Exodus in detail. So that's, maybe not every single detail. Okay, not everybody knows all that. That's fine. So with the advice that many Rebbeim give, many rabbis give for people who want to, for whatever extreme health reasons that they have, to not stay up late, not to eat too late, is to start the singing for the Seder, which is the part after Magid. To start that part, the Hallel and Yirtzeh, can be done earlier under those kinds of conditions. So that way you're at least you're making it so that you have a little more, and you can try to go through the Magid a little bit faster. Perhaps you don't stop at every single opportunity with all the cool divrei Torah you heard. You try to move things along enough that you try to eat as soon as possible. You could probably get through most of the Seder between 8 and 8:30 till you get through Magid. You could, and then you'd be eating at 8:30 again. And then you have all these mitzvot of matzah, maror, korech, and the shulchan orech, and then the afikomen, and then you bench, and you're pretty much done with the seder. So that's one eitzah. That's one piece of advice. That's pretty much all I have for sort of the halachic aspects of the seder. And then we can get right into the Haggada, if you don't mind, unless you have any questions about what I said. Question.
You were speaking about maror.
Yes.
And the size of a piece of paper.
Yes.
Are we talking about stalks and leaves?
Yes. Stalks
So,
and leaves.
If a person wanted to, then they could take the freshly ground horseradish and kind of combine it in the shear and eat it together?
Yes, some people do that. Some people eat the lettuce together with the horseradish. That way they fulfill the opinion in the Gemara that lettuce should be maror, and then they also fulfill the obligation of it being bitter. So some people do that, and that's fine. And again, the combination of the stalks and leaves of the lettuce with the horseradish should equal at least 1.1 fluid ounces, at least, for each time that you're eating the maror, which is twice in each seder, right? So that's good point. Okay. Let's get into the Haggada, shall we? First, I'd like to give you an idea of what Haggadot I used for preparation, or some of the sources. I listened to one of my favorite rabbis on Torah Anytime, Rabbi Shraga Kallis. So he had a nice speech about the Haggada. I listened to Rabbi Shalom Rosner of the OU. And I looked at Rabbi Yisachar Fran Haggada this year, and my good friend, who many of you know, Rabbi Nisanel Berkowitz, came out with a Haggada this year called On This Night, and it's primarily the focus is, as I said before, this idea of building emunah. He says in his introduction very beautifully. He says, we have to remember that there are several mitzvot that are based in emunah, in believing in Hashem. The Rambam in Sefer Mitzvot enumerates 3 of them, right? Number 1, to believe in Hashem, as it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It says one of the first of the 10 commandments. I am Hashem, your God. So to believe in Hashem is a mitzvah, right? To believe in the oneness of Hashem, that He's one and unique and different from anyone or anything else, and doesn't need anything. Where do we get that mitzvah? From the verse that many of us say, hopefully twice a day, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He is one and none other. The very next verse we say is, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, which is number 3. You have to love Hashem. There's a love relationship, which means you give to Him, He gives to you. You recognize and acknowledge all the good that He does for you. There's also negative commandments, and there's et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is part of. If we don't do that, if we don't, focus on that in the Seder, he writes, the entire purpose of the Seder is lost. Furthermore, and perhaps more devastating, is the fact that our children may grow up being unaware of what they are supposed to do. They may grow up being aware of what they are supposed to be doing without having any understanding of why. They may lose sight of the forest for the trees, meaning they get stuck on doing the mitzvot and never get an appreciation of the connection to Hashem that's supposed to come about through them. We do all these mitzvot. These mitzvot aren't just empty little nothings. They're not just hoops to jump through. They are a connection to the commander, the boss. Hashem told you to do it, and by doing these things, we're showing him how much we love him. And if we don't have Hashem in mind, then what are we doing these things for? So that's part of what the Seder is all about, which I'd like to sort of focus on in some of the commentary that I'll be bringing today. Let's start with halachma. We raise up the matzot and we say halachma, and use one of the translations I have here in front of me. It's a good idea to have a Haggada open when you're teaching the Haggada. So the beginning of Magi, we say halachma anya diachalu av hatana the Arab the Mitzrayim. We say. We say this is our bread, the bread of the bread of the poor, and we invite people to come and eat, and we're basically saying that that everybody's invited to our table. Of course, it's kind of a moot point if your door is closed, obviously, right? Nobody really hears your invitation. But this is the bread of our affliction. Our forefathers ate in the land of Mitzrayim. So why do we mention all this about that our forefathers ate, et cetera, et cetera? So I heard an interesting insight about this from the Khatam Sofer. So there's the Gemara in Beitza, 32b, if you want to look this up. It says, Amarav Natan bar Abba Amarav, Kol ha-mitzape ala shulchan acherim, olam chashach ba'ado. It says, anybody who relies on the table of others, the world is dark for him. Now, there's different interpretations, obviously, but I'm pretty sure just a simple explanation makes enough sense as it is. In other words, life is bitter for somebody who needs to eat at somebody else's table. Somebody has to rely on others. The world is dark. It's a difficult place. So the Khatam Sofer writes, amongst other things, he writes that there's a verse at the very, very end of Sefer Bereshit, when Yosef is talking to his brothers, and his brothers are concerned that maybe he's going to turn on them, maybe their father just died, so maybe he was really been upset with them all along. He just didn't kill them before because for the sake of their father. So they come and they beg him, and they say, "We'll be your servants. Anything you want, just don't hurt us." And then he says to them, don't be afraid. I will support you and your children. And that should be the end of the verse, right? But the verse continues with 4 or 5 more words. V'yinachem utam v'yidaber al libam. And he comforted them and he spoke to their hearts. So the way the Khatam Sofer reads this verse is beautiful. He says, first he told them that he's going to take care of them. How did they feel after he told them that he would take care of them? So, okay, so no, you're not going to kill me. That's great. But wait a minute. Now I'm just like a pauper in your hands. You're the rich, you're the rich heavyweight, and you're gonna, take care of us. Well, what are we? We're nothing now. We're just, we're bums. We're no good. So what does he say to them? He says to them, no. This is only for now. I'm only taking care of you while we're in Egypt. And then he comforted them. First, he spoke what he said about he's going to support them. And then is a different thing. He comforted them. He spoke to their hearts. What does that mean? Says the Khatam Sofer. It means he comforted them by telling them that this support would only be temporary. So that's how we also start the Seder, says the Khatam Sofer. We're inviting the guests, right? Right? Please come. And it is a food of our affliction. Come. Anybody who's hungry should come and eat. And then we say, this year we are here, next year we're going to be in Israel, this year we are slaves, next year we're going to be free people. In other words, don't feel so bad. Why? Because this is only now. In the future, later on, we're not going to have to take care of you. You're going to be an independent person. You're going to have, you're going to have your own home. You're going to be your own self. You'll have guests. And that's what we're saying. It's a beautiful message. It's very true. Nobody wants to feel like they're, beholden to others. Everybody wants to feel independent. And this is an important lesson for especially those of us who are having guests. It's important to remember that our guests want to have a sense of dignity, and as they should, and that is something that the Torah wants from us. Again, building on this idea of emunah, of faith in Hashem. Faith in Hashem, as the Kotzker Rebbe would often say, faith in Hashem begins with, no, not the Kotzker, sorry, take that back. Tzadok HaKohen would often say, faith in Hashem begins with faith in yourself. You have to know that you are a descendant of Adam. You're a descendant of greatness. Tselem Elokim. Hashem's image is in you somehow. There's a halacha. I don't know how many people know this halacha. It's such a halacha that when you wake up in the mornings, besides washing your hands, you're supposed to wash your face. The halacha. You're supposed to, it doesn't have to be like a serious, face scrub or something. You have to pour some water on your face. It helps you wake up anyway. But aside from all that, there's another reason that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The reason is because it's not just your face. You say Adam was made in the image of Hashem, and you're a descendant of Adam. Somehow your face reflects God's face. Obviously, he's not physical, etc. I get that, but you have to look at yourself as a holy thing. It's a beautiful idea. Aside from how you're supposed to look at everybody else is also Tzelem Elokim. It goes a long way. All right. Question?
So if a person washes their hands in the morning for Natilat Yadayim, do they have to be careful not to get that water in their eyes?
That water should be dried. That water should not go in their eyes. But they need to wash their hands again to put water on their face. That is correct. Yeah. Okay. We have on the Seder plate, we have an egg. And there's a lot to say about why we have an egg there. And I think one of the things that builds the moon, at least for me, I don't know, I can't speak for others. There's other people who've said this to me before. I can't speak for everybody, but one of the things that makes emunah, faith in Hashem, stronger is the fact that all of Torah is connected. All these different ideas, it seems so strange and seem so disconnected. If you learn enough, you're able to put the pieces together into a full picture of a puzzle. So one little piece of Torah, I think, that kind of encapsulates that is something we can learn from this egg. The Ramah in Shulchan Aruch tells us that we have an egg on the Seder plate because an egg symbolizes mourning. It's the mourner's meal. And we have to kind of remember mourning on Pesach. Mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, right? Not M-O-R. All right, so not mourning as in being sad for somebody's passing. And so why are we mourning on Seder night? Because it happens to be that the same night of the year that is the Seder night is also the same night that Tisha B'Av falls out in that year. In other words, I can tell you now that this year Tisha B'Av, if we have a Tisha B'Av, it'll be a Tisha B'Av because it's the 9th of Av, but if we commemorate Tisha B'Av in a sad way, it'll be on a Wednesday night. Right? How do I know that? Because the Seder is going to be on the Wednesday night. It always works out that way. And because of that, we eat an egg. Sort of symbolizes that. That's one of the explanations. But I think there's also a deeper lesson that we can learn. And this deeper lesson has to do with a verse in Parshat Shalach, Pashat Shalach, the spies who were sent to check out Israel and came back with a negative report, the Jewish people cried that night. And because of that, that's when Tisha B'Av began. The Midrash, the Gemara also tells us that Hashem said, you cried for no reason. I'll give you a reason to cry that night. And from that night on, for the rest of history, until Mashiach comes, we'll be crying on Tisha B'Av. It says that those spies brought back certain fruit, figs, dates, pomegranates, and they were bigger than the fruit that the Jewish people were used to, and so the people were scared that there's giants in the land. It happens to be. Let me first point out who says this. This is a thought from Rav Menachem Zemba, Hashem Menachem Damav. Rav Menachem Zemba was one of the great rabbis who lived in Warsaw during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, shot to death by the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, and he's trying to seek cover. And he was a Torah giant. He was a child prodigy, a Torah giant. And one of the things he said, one of the things he wrote before, obviously, before his passing, is this idea. There's a Mishnah in Bikurim. Bikurim is the Mishnah that talks about the first fruits that are brought, and there's a whole ceremony, etc. And the Mishnah in Bikurim, the first Mishnah in the third chapter, talks about the whole process. The farmer walks out in his field, sees the first fruit budding from a tree. He's supposed to tie a ribbon around it so that he can take those fruit and bring it to Yerushalayim. And when he gets to Yerushalayim, he gives a whole spiel, a whole what's called a vidui, a confession of sorts. That's all later on. What fruits are mentioned in that particular Mishnah? Also the same fruits, figs, dates, and pomegranates. The same fruits that the spies took. What's the connection? So Rav Zemba quotes the Arizal that Tisha B'Av, that the mitzvah of Bikurim is a tikkun, is a fixing up of the sin of the Meraglim, which makes sense. It's not just Kabbalistic, it makes practical sense. Because what are you doing when you're bringing the first fruit? You're saying that these fruit belong to Hashem. These fruit don't belong to me. I don't make my own decisions. Hashem makes the decisions, and I do what he says. That's exactly what the spies didn't do. The spies decided to go on their own. They decided not that they were sent on their own. But once they were in Israel, they decided on their own what kind of report to make, contrary to what they were told to do. And that's what caused Tisha B'Av. And you want to hear another amazing connection to all this? What do we read during the Magid of the Seder? What psukim? We read verses and then we interpret them. The Baal Haggada gives interpretations to all these verses. Almost all the verses that we interpret all come from that vidui that is said by the person who brings his bikurim to the Beit HaMikdash in the time when we lived in Israel. That same confession, that same statement, that whole spiel, that's what is said that's the text of the Magid that the Baal Haggada, the author of the Haggada, interprets. And so that's what we do. We read certain verses. But before we read the verses, we sing a song. Baruch Hamakom Baruch Hu. Right? Blessed is the Hashem, usually how we interpret that. But Baruch Hamakom does not mean Hashem. Literally translated, Baruch Hamakom means blessed is the place. And amongst other times that we call Hashem Hamakom, the place, this is one of the places, pun not intended, this is one of those situations in which we call Hashem Hamakom. Of all of the names we could use for Hashem, we say Hamakom. Why is that? Rav Pam gives an answer that's very important. First of all, we have to remember that Hashem is not limited in space. He created space. He created time. He created space. That's one of the reasons for, again, back to our concept of Emunah. That's one of the reasons why when we started the class, we are talking about the things you need to, the certain measurements you need. It's because measurements, time, you have to place, amounts, all of that is created by Hashem. The whole physical world, all the atoms of the whole universe are all created by Hashem. So by following his rules of how much needs to be done, how quickly something needs to be done, that means we're following Hashem's rules of the way he wants the world to be run. So that's the first thing that when we say Baruch HaMakom, blessed is the place, blessed is Hashem, that we're calling him a Makom, to emphasize the fact that he's not limited in space. But Rav Pam says something else. He says he was once told a story by a rabbi who was in Israel, and he met up with a Russian immigrant to Israel. And the Russian immigrant told him that he became religious because he realized how wrong Lenin was. Vladimir Lenin, not John Lennon. Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, said that the Jews are not a nation. Just like that. The Jews he encouraged to eventually to, melt into Russian society as much as possible. He discouraged Jewish education for that reason, amongst other things. And the reason was because Jews, he said, are not a nation. Why aren't they a nation? For the same usual sociological reasons that make up a nation. What's a nation? What's the definition of a nation? Can you consider yourself, can you identify yourself, I don't know about nowadays, but can you identify yourself as a Frenchman if you've never been to France? Probably not, right? It doesn't work. I mean, you can call yourself whatever you want, but you won't be accepted as a Frenchman. But I remember on this topic, sort of focus on this idea for a second. I was once watching an interview or listening to an interview, I don't remember now, of a soccer player. There was a big soccer game in San Diego of two big Mexican teams where had this huge playoff in San Diego back when there was a Qualcomm Stadium, and they were playing the game there. And the stands, there's huge traffic. I don't know if you remember that day. I think about 10, 15 years ago. There's a huge traffic everywhere. People all over San Diego, Mexican Americans from all over San Diego and all over America, I think, were coming in to see this game. And they were cheering different teams. And one of the Mexican soccer players was being asked, what do you think about the fact that there's so many Mexicans in the stands who are supporting you? He said, these people around me, all these people in the stands, they're not Mexican, they're American. So, how do you define somebody's nationality? Nationality is usually defined by what nation they live in, what country they're in. You're a Mexican if you live in Mexico. You're an Israeli if you live in Israel, right? So the same thing goes for Russians or from Russia. Okay, so Lenin said the Jews don't have a land, so that they don't have a nation. There might be a race, they might be a religion, they might be a culture. They're not a nationality. You can't call them a nation. And there are different terms like that in sociology. So says this Russian to this rabbi who told this to Rabbi Pam, and now I'm telling to you. Two things are wrong with that statement. Number one, we might not have a nation, we might not have land, but no matter what period of time, no matter what's going on in history, the Jewish people always have a makom. They always have Hashem. Hashem is our makom, no matter what, no matter where. Aside from the fact, he says, that we have now Eretz Yisrael, number two, the reason that Lenin was wrong, because even if it's not living in Eretz Yisrael is every Jew's home. Every Jew has that nationality. Hashem binds us, whether it's just spiritually speaking that Hashem is our makom everywhere, or the fact that Hashem gave us this land and promised us this land. That's good enough, as we're going to see very shortly from Moshe. All of that binds us together, and that's why we call Hashem, in this case, in the Haggada, why we call Hashem Hamakom. again, building on that relationship of how much Hashem loves us and how Hashem controls the world. And we see even the big, tough Russian and Soviet Union couldn't stand up to Hashem's power. We mentioned the four sons. We'll say we'll say a couple of ideas about the four sons. Number one, the Chacham. This idea comes from Avram Shor, my Rosh Yeshiva's brother, in a book he wrote called Halekach v'Halibuv. He writes there that the Chacham asks, what are all these laws and what are these mitzvot and hukim, edut? What is all this? Right? And he is very specific about them. So what's his question really? Right? So there are different ways to interpret this. Of course, this is why people write Haggadas every year. What is all this that Hashem has commanded us? And you're supposed to answer him with the idea that the afikomen, right, is the last thing you should eat. Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikomen. You're not supposed to eat anything after the Korban Pesach with the afikomen. That's how you're supposed to end the night. You're not supposed to eat anything after that and ruin the taste of that as you go to sleep. So, what is the Chacham really asking? So, according to Rav Avram Shor, Shlita, he says the Chacham is really asking. There's so many mitzvot. There's mishpatim and edut, chukim, all these things, but they don't last. What does he mean? They don't last. So there's a story. There's a metaphor said by the Maggid of Mezrich that there's a prince who's trying to find his way back into a palace. He's lost in the forest, trying to feel his way back to the palace. He can't see anything. There's no electric lights. Doesn't have the LED flashlight on his cell phone. Isn't working, right? So the prince is trying to find his way back to the palace, and it's too dark. But then it starts to thunder. And every once in a while, there's a flash of thunder. And for a split second, he's able to see where he's going. He's able to see the palace. And then he goes in the dark, trips, falls, hits his head, whatever. Keeps going in the direction. There's another flash of thunder, and he can, of lightning, sorry. Thunder doesn't flash. Anyway, so there's another flash of lightning, and he follows the palace again, and he sees it again. So that's it. So that's the same with us. We're stumbling around in our lives. We get lost. We get confused. But every once in a while, there's a flash. And that's the mitzvahs we perform. That's our mitzvot. Our mitzvot give us a light that guides us back to the direction we're supposed to be going. You stop doing mitzvot for a little while. You skip a mitzvah. You sleep through a mincha or whatever. You sort of lost your way for a little bit. And you have to feel your way around. And you're in the darkness. You're going to trip a little bit. You're going to fall a little bit. And then you're going to do another mitzvah. And that mitzvah is going to be that lightning that's going to direct you back to the direction that you're supposed to go to. That's what the Chacham is saying. There's so many mitzvot. It doesn't seem like there's any kind of point to them. Why? It's only for tonight. I can't do this mitzvah tomorrow. I can't eat matzah next month. It's not going to do me any good. Well, it's Pesach Sheni, it's a different issue, right? But what's the point? There is a point. After the afikomen, there's a point. You can't eat after the afikomen. It lasts. That taste of the mitzvah pulls you through the night, and then pulls you through into the next mitzvah that you're supposed to do. And that's exactly how we're supposed to envision mitzvot in general, as this connecting bond to Hashem, where He connects to us and loves us. The Rav Frand in his Haggada writes about the Russia, the evil son. What makes him so evil? He's asking questions. Everybody's asking questions. What's so bad about his question? So he writes a story about Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, also known as Rav Chaim Brisker. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhin Yeshiva, and this was at the time of the Haskalah, of the Enlightenment movement, and many people were being seduced by the Reform movement, by Enlightenment in general, intellectualism, science, these sorts of ideas. and they were leaving Judaism, and they were leaving religious observance. One of the students left the yeshiva and then came back later on, many years later, and said, Rabbi, I have so many Emunah related questions. Can you answer them for me? This is great. Emunah, great. This is what we're talking about. Like, sit down, I'll talk to you. So that's exactly what Rav Chaim Brisker told him. I can sit and discuss with you all night long. But first I have a question for you. He says to him, when did you begin to have these questions? Did you have these questions first, and then you were Mechalel Shabbat, then you stopped keeping Shabbat? Or did you stop keeping Shabbat first, and then all of a sudden these questions came to you? The guy said, yeah, okay, yeah. First I stopped keeping Shabbat, and then I got all these kinds of questions. Says in that case, says the Rav, you don't have kushiot, you don't have questions. You have terutzim, you have answers. I can't answer terutzim. I can't answer answers. You've already solidified a philosophy in your head. You've stopped doing mitzvot. You lost that bond with Hashem, and now you're going to do whatever you want. And at this point, you're going to have questions. You lost your way. Back to that idea we said from the Maggid of Mezrich. He's fumbling around in the dark, and he doesn't have the lightning to bring him back. All right. Well, we said we'd say this thought from Rav Moshe, so now we have to. There's an idea we say in the Haggada. We say you might have thought. Eventually, we say the Haggada on the night of Pesach. But one of the ideas that we say during the Maggid is you might have thought maybe you should say it from when? From Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Nobody really talks about why. Why would you think that? Well, I could have thought maybe you should talk about it from Purim. That's not an option. The only option that's given is from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. What happened in Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Are you listening to this? Rav Moshe says, Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzedek Livracha. You know what happened in Rosh Chodesh Nisan? That's when Hashem promised to save the Jewish people. And Hashem's promise is like it already happened. Hashem said, I'm going to save you. That means he saved you already. It's as good as done. Consider it done, right? As people say. Whatever he promises, he's going to do. There's no doubt. So that's why you might have thought I should start saying the Haggada from then. I should start saying the Haggada not on Pesach when Hashem rescued me, when Hashem said he'd rescue me, because he'd rescued me already, just by saying that. Rav Moshe brings an interesting Gemara in Avodah Zarah, page 52. It says there that there's the people of the land, the people of Canaan, used to worship trees. So you're supposed to destroy the trees that were worshipped by Avodah Zarah. But there's another rule about Avodah Zarah, that you can't destroy Avodah Zarah that you don't own. It's not yours. How can you destroy it? There's complications. I'm not going to get into the halakhic aspects of this. But if it's a tree of Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael, it's not yours, is it? Says Rav Moshe. But Hashem promised Eretz Yisrael to you. That means it's yours. It's already yours. So you do own it, and then you can and should destroy the trees. And that's again this idea that Hashem cares about us and wants us to have emunah. So I said I would share an idea from my friend Rabbi Berkowitz. So besides what I already shared a little bit from his introduction, there's a part in the Haggada where we comment. The Baal Haggada, the author of the Haggada, comments on a phrase Gadol Atzum V'Rav. Right, the Jewish people became great and powerful and many. Now, all of these words, they're all basically synonymous. They're all different words for becoming many, becoming great. Right? So why do we need all these words? So first, the Baal Haggada says Gadol Atzum, great and powerful, Kama Shenemar, because the verse says, right, Bnei Yisrael paru v'yishurtu v'yirbu v'yamdu b'ma'od ma'od. The Jewish people, they multiplied and swarmed and they became great and strong, etc. That's from the Haggada story. Then something weird happens in the. That's all part of the Yetziat Mitzrayim story. But then something very strange happened on the word v'rav and numerous. What does the Haggada do? The Baal Haggada says, Kama Shenemar, it says in the verse in Yecheskel, not related to seemingly Yitziat Mitzrayim, says Revava Kitzemach Hasade Mitatich V'Tirbi V'Tigdali V'Tavo Ba'adi Adayim Shadayim Nevonu V'Sadech Tzimeach At Edom V'Adia V'Amor Alach V'Arech Misboset B'Damayich V'Omar Alach B'Damayich V'Omar Alach B'Damayich Chei. This translation, Rabbi Berkowitz's translation, numerous, it says in Ezekiel 16:7, I have made you to be numerous as the vegetation of the field, and you increased and grew and became highly ornamented. Your breasts were set and your hair grew, but you were naked and barren. Then the next verse it says, and when I passed by you and saw you weltering in your blood, I said to you, in your blood live. I said to you, in your blood live. That's from Ezekiel, Yecheskel 16:6. Not the next verse. It's the previous verse. He said 16:7, and then we said 16:6. And he writes, here the Baal Haggada is explaining the details of the different words for growth mentioned in the verse. The pasuk, the verse, uses the words Gadol, Atzum, Varav, great, powerful, and numerous. And the Baal Haggada seems to be explaining that Gadol means in quantity, Atzum means in quality. But what's the third term of Varav indicating? For this, the Baal Haggada brings a pasuk, a verse, which compares them to grass in a field. What is this teaching us? I was talking about vegetation. What does that have to do with anything? He says, and I think the Baal Haggada is telling us that Varav is a description of how they multiplied, like vegetation of the field. Perhaps this means with ease and without difficulty, just as vegetation grows in the field, whereas having that many children may be very taxing on a parent. The Haggada tells us it was actually quite easy, and they didn't have the child rearing and childbearing difficulties that mothers and parents usually have. But then the Baal Haggada continues with the next verse, the next psukim, actually previous psukim, which describe metaphorically Klal Yisrael's physical development, and concludes with the words, I said to you, in your blood live, repeated. And the question is, what's the purpose of this extension of the verse? We had already, just by telling us, I made you numerous as vegetation, you've already proven the fact that Varav means to grow numerous like vegetation. In other words, like he said, with ease. Why do you need any more than that? And out of order. So he says, even the underlying message, which is understood from there, namely that Bnei Yisrael needed mitzvot in order to merit Exodus, doesn't really belong here at this point in the Haggada, when all it's teaching us is about our exponential growth. So why this other addition? And perhaps it's telling us how it was possible for such a tremendous growth under such trying circumstances, because Hashem was very intimately involved. Hashem cared about every single part of this. He quotes a Gemara that says that they multiplied, they spread out in the past tense. Rish Lakish says, Ruach HaKodesh itself proclaimed to the Egyptians, as long as this nation is afflicted, the more we're afflicted, the more Hashem is going to multiply us. In other words, Hashem saw our pain, and because of our pain, He rewarded us with an easy birth, an easy child rearing. Again, showing how Hashem is intimately connected with every single part of our lives. And that again connects to this idea of how important Hashem is and how He's connected to us, and how, and this is a great time, if you have time in your Haggada and you're not running late, as we are right now, this is a great time in the Haggada to pause and ask the people for experiences, stories of their own, where they saw Hashem's hand in their lives, where coincidences happened that were beyond coincidence. And that happens all the time in all of our lives. That's something called Hashgacha Pratit. We spoke about that in Shul many times. And in our Shul Seder, God willing, we'll also have an opportunity to share some of these stories of miracles that happened to us, little miracles. There's a series of book called Small Miracles. So these are small miracles. They happen to us all the time. We're regular people. And these kinds of stories, hearing them from other people, first of all, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to share these stories. It's a mitzvah to hear these stories. It's called Persume Nisa, that big mitzvah that we do when we light the candles of Hanukkah. That mitzvah is called Persume Nisa. We're advertising. We're what's the word? We're magnifying a miracle. We're letting other people know about it. putting it on a billboard and saying, look, miracles happen to me. Hashem cares about me. Hashem cares about you. And that's exactly the message of the Pesach Seder. And again, to really appreciate that, you need rest. You need to do things correctly. There's steps to follow. Perform the Seder correctly according to all the mitzvot, and definitely make sure that you have the opportunity to tell your family, to tell your guests, to tell your friends that Hashem loves you, Hashem loves them, and that Hashem runs the world, and that you love Him back. Thank you for listening. I'm going to stop the sharing to Facebook, and if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can ask them in the comment section. Thank you.